Hey everybody, I'm Philip,
And I'm Justin.
and together we are Pajamas. And we just watched Candyman, the original. And by that, he just watched it for the first time. I just watched it for the bajillionth time. Aging myself here, but I actually saw this movie in the theaters when it came out. I was well into my horror nerddom by then. Loved Clive Barker back then. And yeah, it was quite an experience. So yeah, imagine seeing this when it came out in the 90s in the
Mhm.
theater. It's also storming outside, so there might be some ambient noise from that. And the neighbors just got home, because of course they did. That being said, I am dying to know, what did you think?
It was amazing.
Yay.
I would call it actually not only, well, yes, a horror, but I would say more specifically a psychological horror,
Mm-hmm.
especially since I especially like how it's portrayed that it could be interpreted either way,
Yep.
whether or not she's actually seeing this being or if everything is happening in her head.
Right. Yep.
I really enjoyed it,
Mm-hmm.
especially for the music. The music was
Yes.
very
The
captivating.
first thing I wrote was score.
Yes.
Yep. Philip Glass outdid himself on this one. And a fun little fact, this is the first, this melody, the dun 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 dun
Hmm.
dun 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 dun, is the first thing I taught myself on piano. And that's significant because I am musically illiterate. Like, I don't have an ear for it. I don't understand. I understand what the notes mean, but I cannot read them. I'm musically stupid. So anything I do is by ear. I didn't have a piano, but my mom had a friend that did. So when we go and visit her, I would just, ding, ding, bling, 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 bling. Blah, 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 blah. Pretend I was making noise. But no, this was the first like thing I taught. And it wasn't as like intricate with both hands. It was just like me like, it's just with one hand figuring it out. But yeah, the score is fantastic. From the piano to the choir to it's haunting and it fits the movie perfectly. Like for being almost 30 years old, this movie, I think, does a good job of standing the test of time.
Yes, when I saw it, it didn't seem to need a remake of any kind.
I agree. That's also why we're doing this. Tonight we watched Candyman. Tomorrow night we are watching the remake. And
Mhm.
I asked you if you wanted to see the original before we saw the remake.
Yes, because there may be an aspect in the remake that may be hearkening to the original that
Exactly.
I wouldn't
Right. Right.
be able to grasp because of not seeing the original,
Right. So that's what we're doing. But we're doing it over 2 nights. That way we have time to let you, like, I've seen this a dozen times at least.
which shows how much you like it.
Exactly. It was a cool time. Late 80s, early 90s. Getting into Clive Barker. The Hellbound Heart. The Forbidden. Reading the books. The first book I ever read by him was The Damnation Game. And I was like hooked immediately. And I thought for sure he was going to be like the driving force in horror going forward. And he kind of wasn't, and it was disappointing. But back to this, I just think it, like, from storytelling to
Mhm.
cinematography to the esoteric way they kind of set up whether Helen was crazy or not, like you said, was well done. And I think it's cool that we had, I don't mean it in a bad way, but like a black villain, but not even a villain. Like he was like this romantic, very like Ellen, just very, his voice, he was cast so perfectly. Tony Todd was born to play this, from his appearance to his voice, because he has that deep baritone, very sexy voice. And they used that every time, because she'd be like, leave me alone, Helen, and she'd just be like she would just go into that trance. And
It's very hypnotic.
yeah, so I think it's very cool that it's not often in horror we have, like I'll say a black antagonist, but just a person of color portrayed in such a way that, yes, he's the villain. He's the Jason, the Freddy.
Mhm.
It's cool to have somebody on that level as like a Jason, a Freddy, a Pinhead, because these are all white dudes. In the early 90s, it was cool to experience that, and it was kind of like a milestone.
I did notice the social commentary that
Oh
was in the
yes.
film. It did draw attention.
Oh yeah, I did write in my notes, and she even said it. A black woman gets killed, and a black kid gets maimed, in the bathroom, and nothing happens. But a white woman gets attacked in the bathroom, and they shut the place down. They like lock it down. So
A sad but eye-opening thing.
the early 90s were a different time. Of course they were, because they were 30 years ago almost. But having grown up in them, older, and, I wasn't like old, but I was still, cognizant of society and was going on, you know. I think it was cool that it was not only a horror movie with a horror villain that was black, but also that it touched upon these social commentaries, you know, of what it's like to be, you know, living in the projects or the ghetto and not being taken seriously and not being listened to, and everyone thinks, you know, you're a gangbanger or you're doing drugs or you're dealing drugs, you know, all the stereotypes that.
Whereas, for example, the lady simply wanted to live her life and raise her child.
Yeah, yeah. I think it was really cool that for the time, and I'm not trying to talk about it like it's the 50s and there was like, you know, separate bathrooms or separate water fountains or anything like that. I'm just saying for, you know, for a time in cinema to take a horror movie and still have that message in there. Like I left the theater just like and from the opening shot, you know, that overhead shot of the streets. You know, there weren't drones. Then just that really cool shot and it just sweeps and that music, you know, kicks in. So it's cool to have so many important things in one movie. An important villain, an important message, you know, an important viewpoint. And the irony of the message the movie was trying to send, how it mirrored real life. Because Tony Todd himself has said there's like unused footage of more like intimacy between him and Helen. But I think it was producers or someone in charge wasn't comfortable with a black man and a white woman being that intimate. And I learned this, like, I think it was from Dead Meat's Kill Count videos. I think he discusses it and shows the clip of Tony Todd talking about it. And when I heard that, I was like, that is just the irony of that. This movie is addressing, you know, that Candyman was killed because society was not willing to accept that he had impregnated and was having, you know, a love affair with a white woman. And then it, you know, the two actors playing, you know, these characters translates to real life when there is a producer, someone in charge who's not comfortable with the same thing. I just think that's fascinating because
That is ironic.
I was just like, wow. But I am glad that Tony Todd was able to parlay this into, you know, an icon. Like, it's not every day that, you know, we get a new horror icon.
Yes, it was mentioned earlier, these classic ones, Dracula, Frankenstein's monster. It's good to actually see that these storytellings, that they still offer some creativity, that something new can happen.
Yeah.
Instead of doing the same story over and over
Yeah.
again. It shows that folklore can still happen.
And I love that the premise is the power of belief.
Yes.
You know, you caused my congregation to not believe in me anymore. So you forced me to come. You summoned me. You forced me to show myself. He was content just being whispers and folklore and urban legend.
Yes.
You know, he was content with having a copycat
He
walk
was,
around with a hook in his hand and terrorizing people.
He was able to be immortal yet not have to go through the drudgery of actually being in the world.
Yeah, exactly. But then once the guy with the, you know, the hook in his hand was caught, you know, and it was like, oh, Candyman wasn't real. It was just this guy the whole time. Well, Candyman's like, well, shit, you fucked that up. Now I gotta do some stuff.
Well, yes. How is he supposed to be some sort of horror icon if no one's continuing his story?
Well, how is he supposed to be feared and, you know, and all that? Yeah. So I just love the idea, you know, like, be immortal with me. And even the end with, it was always you, Helen. And you see the mural on the wall, and the woman that he died for was someone that looked like Helen. So, you know, it's very romantic. It's very, it's like a tragic Shakespearean play. You know, these star-crossed lovers, tragedy befalls them, but the power of love makes them into an evil killing being. But then he sees the woman that he died for all this time later.
Very sweet.
Yeah, I thought that would be something that you would really gravitate towards because that's right up your alley.
Yes.
Is there anything else that stuck out?
Yes. The bees.
Yes.
That it's a very excellent symbolism of portraying fear and being overcome by it. Feeling hopeless.
Right.
And that it's overwhelming and it's cloistering you.
Right. Fun fact, if I recall correctly, the bees were real.
Yes, I noticed that in the ending credits, and I I thought those were actual real bees.
Another fun fact: the scene where he was kissing Helen, he actually has real bees in his mouth. He's wearing like a prosthetic, not a prosthetic. He's wearing like a mouth guard kind of thing inside of his mouth. That's like a barrier. So you put it in, and it's like a barrier that the bees can't. And then they put bees. That's freaking epic.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
I assumed that somehow they managed to do this special effect.
nope. And another really cool thing I liked is just the power of suggestion. Like I said, or even just how they used Candyman's hypnotic effect on Helen. And like you said, is she crazy? Is this real? They show the video of her in the hospital bed, strapped down, and he's here, he's under the bed.
And yes, it did make it look like she was hallucinating.
I think it's really a neat storytelling device that his hypnotic effect over her was so great that she would black out. He would do these heinous things, and she would come to, and it would paint her as the murderer, the culprit.
Yes, an extreme case of being at the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah. But another cool fun fact, like, did you ever notice how the actress who played Helen, Virginia Madsen, looked like she was in a trance? Like, she was like doing a really good job of looking like she was entranced by Candyman. That's because the director put her in a trance. He was using like hypnosis to the point she had to just say, I can't do it anymore. You can tell where like it's the real hypnosis because she is in it. And she does a good job with acting like she is, but
for authenticity.
Yeah.
I'm actually very impressed with the authenticity in this film.
Yeah, like they really went above and beyond to make this a unique horror experience. It was cool to have it, if I recall correctly, they filmed in a real,
in a real abandoned building?
I don't think it was abandoned. I think it was a real building. And I forget the full details on this one. Maybe you can let us know in the comments below, but I'm pretty sure that, it was authentic. I guess so much of this was authentic. And it was just cool to see that environment with a different set of eyes on it, with a different viewpoint on it. This movie is groundbreaking in so many ways, and it's so important in so many ways. For a long time, I just felt like it didn't get the love that it deserved. I guess it was a cult classic. When it came out, it was a hit. It's had many sequels. They're not very good, but I've seen them all. I'm glad as time went on, it became appreciated and got the respect that it deserves. Because it's a very, very important movie. It's not just a mindless horror movie at all. It was well thought out, well executed. It takes the source material and just makes it, into this really cool modern day folklore.
Yes, it's like a study in anthropology in which, yes, they were, as was mentioned by the teacher or professor, that it's a projection of what we're subconsciously fearing.
Yeah.
And what was trying to be looked into was, why did it manifest in a character like this?
Mm-hmm.
Which I suspect is what they were trying to do at all.
Yeah, exactly.
And it doesn't happen in a stereotypical horror place like a haunted house or a dark wood.
Exactly. Yes, that's what I was trying to say. Yeah, it wasn't, the usual. It did a good job of making it feel grounded in reality because in a way it was. Where they filmed was real. The stuff they did was real. Like, they kept it very, as we said, authentic.
With the location being in the city instead of in a faraway place or in the country where there's nobody around.
Or even on a set. Realism that really, really adds to the ambiance of what's going on. Like, even just when Candyman first shows up, it's just standing, with his arms behind his back in the parking garage. You say that, the villain shows up on parking garage. It sounds kind of like, what? That's the first time we see them? Really? But it works.
Yes.
It's so good.
If it's said like that, then yes, it doesn't seem that intimidating, but when it's actually seen, then one can sense the intimidation.
Yeah. Anything else that...
Shall we go to the notes?
If what we haven't talked about... I've seen this so many times that... Let's see. What haven't we talked about in the notes?
Phillip's notes.
When I think Jake talks about the kid getting attacked in the bathroom, and he gets it. They found it in the toilet. He says, can't fix that. Better off dead. I'm like,
I can see that.
if it's involuntary. If that is something you want because you want to feel your authentic self, again, authenticity, no judgment, but don't let Candyman do it because it won't be good.
That is actually one thing that if we're being nitpicky about anything, why would someone, they hear or want to know if someone's all right, pick up a knife and then go to see what the commotion is?
In fairness, I'm thinking, I wake up somewhere, I hear screaming. Okay. This is either something bad is happening or something bad has happened. I don't know if it's present or past tense. So I'm going to arm myself just in case it's present tense.
How about in the ending? She's preparing the meal. Why take the knife with her to the bathroom? She didn't take everything that she was doing with her, but she happened to keep the knife. Why take it with her? Is she afraid of anything?
No, it's just you're doing something and you're like, what's going on? And it's like a mindless extension of what you were doing. You're not like, oh, I have a knife in hand. I must put,
I would think that one would put the knife down to then see, is everything all right?
Well, no. I think in that situation, you hear like screaming or noises or bad things coming from the bathroom. You're not going to think like, must put knife down, then go to this, then walk to like you're going to be like,
it is incriminating.
I will be the Whovians. You will be me with a doctor, and you will nitpick, and I will defend.
Very well.
But speaking of, I really like how the subplot of the professor, the husband, having the affair with a student was woven in. Like, it fit the narrative really well.
And yes, I did have my suspicions, and it turned out that they were accurate.
Yeah, it just, like, it wasn't shoehorned in. It was, like, woven in the fabric of the story nicely, and everything served a purpose. Comes home late. He's not there when she calls. She escapes and sees, her there with her husband. All the beats worked. I thought it was a really nice underlying subplot that they didn't beat you over the head with. That was just integrated. Not subtly, because they weren't subtle, but it was integrated in a way that complemented the story as it was being told.
Yes, in a way that was believable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
That, well, yes, these things do happen. And yes, perhaps he did sleep like a rock and he didn't hear the phone ring.
Except we had the shot of the bed being empty.
Yes.
I was a little creeped out. Like, can you imagine living in an apartment complex? The only thing that separates you from the one next to you is the medicine cabinet. That would kind of creep me out. Like, ugh. I'm sure there are apartments like that. Maybe most apartments are designed like that. I don't know.
It would be very interesting to look into that.
Yeah.
I would actually find the situation to be interesting.
I would find it to be creepy.
Maybe that's why I would find it to be interesting.
Maybe.
Since some things that scare people I find fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of scared and fear, I like the idea that Candyman is feared by the residents of Cabrini Green, but Helen is revered by the residents. Like, I love the shot of the funeral, and they're like, I love that. I get goosebumps every time, even to this day. It's just such a good, nice moment that they saw her sacrifice and what she did. They stopped seeing her as a monster. That was cool. I love it.
Excellently portraying the difference between fear and reverence.
Exactly, yeah.
That, yes, they both involve, there's this powerful figure, but why?
Right.
Showing this respect.
Yes, yeah.
Because of fear of what this thing will do, or because they have an immense amount of honor for it and they're very thankful for it.
Yeah. Heat is turning on. I'm not going to get to turn it off. I forgot. We wanted to talk about this immediately. So I thought it would just be cool just to have a nice relaxed viewing session, and then we would talk about it. Probably going to do reactions for the new one, just because neither of us know what to expect.
Yes.
So, but yeah, that's all for my notes. Everything else is for my patrons over on Patreon. I'm glad that you liked it.
It was wonderful.
Yeah, I think so. There's always that fear going into movies. It was made in 1992 or released in 1992. How's it going to hold up? What are you going to think of it? But I'm glad that you appreciated it for the reasons that I do, that you like the social commentary and the idea of the lore and the mythos. And
yes, and they've both become in a way, one and the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Recall that at the end, her name is said 5 times, and she appears. Not Candyman.
Mm-hmm. Also, hats off to Virginia Madsen for her portrayal, and to Tony Todd for instantly becoming a horror icon. I was also happy to show you another favorite of mine from growing up as a horror fan, and one that was very important to me in a lot of respects. Because when I saw it in the theater, there were maybe 4 or 5 people in that theater. It was not packed at all. Is there anything else you'd like to add about this movie?
No.
Alrighty. Well, it's going to wrap this one up. As always, I don't have a fancy outro, so simply say thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next video. Until then, goodbye.
Goodbye.